The dust from the stagecoach settled slowly over the main street of Redemption Creek, a small town nestled in the Montana Territory where the mountains met the endless prairie. Jake Morrison stepped down from his horse, his boots hitting the wooden planks with a familiar thud. He'd been riding fence lines for 3 weeks straight, checking cattle and mending posts on the sprawling ranch where he worked. His muscles ached, his throat was parched, and all he wanted was a hot meal and a soft bed at the boarding house. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street as Jake tied his horse to the hitching post outside the general store. He needed supplies before heading to get that meal: coffee, tobacco, and maybe some of those peppermint sticks old Mrs. Henderson kept in a jar by the register. As he pushed through the door, the bell jingled overhead, but something else caught his attention before he could step inside. On the wooden bench beside the store's entrance sat 2 small figures. A girl, no more than 10 years old, held a tiny child in her lap. The older girl's dress was patched and faded, her dark hair tangled and dull. The baby she cradled couldn't have been more than 2, with round cheeks smudged with dirt and enormous brown eyes that stared vacantly at nothing in particular. What struck Jake most forcefully was the protective way the older girl's thin arms wrapped around the smaller child, and the look of fierce determination on her gaunt face. Jake paused, his hand still on the door. Children weren't an unusual sight in town, but something about these 2 stopped him cold. The older girl's eyes met his, gray eyes that seemed far too old for her young face, eyes that had seen things no child should see. She didn't speak, didn't ask for anything, just sat there holding her sister with a quiet desperation that made Jake's chest tighten. He stepped back from the door and walked over to the bench. "Afternoon, miss," he said, removing his hat. "You folks waiting for someone?" The girl's jaw tightened. "No, sir." "You got people in town? Family?" "No, sir." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but there was steel in it. Jake crouched down so he was at eye level with her. Up close, he could see the hollow shadows under her eyes, the way her collarbone protruded above the neckline of her dress. The little one in her arms was in no better shape. Too quiet, too still for a child that age. "When's the last time you 2 ate?" The girl's lips pressed together, and she looked away. That told Jake everything he needed to know. "Come on," he said, standing up and gesturing toward the restaurant across the street. "Let's get you some supper." "We don't have money," the girl said quickly, her chin lifting with pride even as her stomach betrayed her with a low growl. "Didn't ask if you did," Jake replied. "I'm buyin'. Can't have young ladies starving on the streets of Redemption Creek. Bad for the town's reputation." He tried to keep his tone light, but his heart was hammering. He'd seen orphans before. The war and the harsh frontier created them with terrible regularity, but something about these 2 pulled at something deep inside him. The girl studied him with those ancient eyes, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded and stood, carefully adjusting her grip on the toddler. Jake noticed she moved stiffly, as if her body hurt. He led them across the dusty street to Molly's restaurant, where the warm smell of beef stew and fresh bread wafted out into the evening air. Molly Patterson, a robust woman with kind eyes and flour perpetually dusting her apron, looked up when they entered. Her gaze swept over the children, and Jake saw her expression soften immediately. "Jake Morrison, you brought me some customers," she said warmly. "These young ladies need feeding, Molly. Put it on my tab." Molly nodded and ushered them to a corner table. Within minutes, she brought out bowls of stew, thick slices of bread with butter, and 2 glasses of cold milk. Jake sat across from them, nursing a cup of coffee, and watched as the older girl carefully fed the little one first, blowing on each spoonful to cool it, wiping the child's chin with gentle patience. Only after the baby had eaten half the bowl did the girl take a bite for herself. "What's your name?" Jake asked quietly. "Sarah," the girl answered between careful bites. "This is Emma." "Sarah and Emma," Jake repeated. "Those are fine names." "I'm Jake." "Where are your folks, Sarah?" The girl's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Dead. Mama died when Emma was born. Papa died 3 weeks ago. Pneumonia." The words were delivered without emotion, but Jake could see the tremor in her hand, the way her throat worked to swallow. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "You got anyone else? Aunts, uncles, grandparents?" Sarah shook her head. Papa had a sister in St. Louis, but we don't know where. Mama's people were all back east somewhere. She never talked about them. Where you been staying? In the wagon. Behind the livery. She said it matter-of-factly, as if sleeping in a wagon was the most natural thing in the world. But Mr. Kelso says we have to leave tomorrow. Says he needs the space. Jake felt anger flare in his chest. Tom Kelso was a hard man, but turning out two little girls seemed low even for him. What were you planning to do? Sarah's fingers tightened around her spoon. I don't know, she whispered, and for the first time, the steel in her voice cracked. I don't know. I can work. I'm strong. I can clean or cook or tend animals. But nobody wants to hire a girl with a baby sister. They all say the same thing. Take Emma to the orphanage in Helena, then maybe they'll consider me. Her gray eyes filled with tears that she furiously blinked back. But I won't. I won't let them take her. She's all I have left, and I'm all she has. I promised Mama I'd take care of her. Jake felt something shift inside his chest, like a door he'd kept locked for years suddenly swinging open. He'd spent the last 8 years drifting from ranch to ranch, keeping to himself, never putting down roots. After losing his own family in a Comanche raid when he was barely 20, he decided it was easier not to get attached to anything or anyone. But looking at Sarah's fierce, frightened face, at little Emma's trusting eyes, he couldn't walk away. Listen, he said slowly, working through the idea even as he spoke it. I work at the Triple Bar Ranch, about 10 miles north of here. The foreman, Dutch Miller, he's a fair man. His wife Clara runs the ranch house, and she's always complaining about needing help with the cooking and cleaning. What if I talk to them? See if they'd take you both on. Sarah stared at him as if he'd offered her the moon. You'd do that? For us? Can't promise anything, Jake cautioned. But I can ask. Worth a try, anyway. What Jake didn't tell her was that he was already forming a bigger plan, one that surprised him with its clarity. He'd been at the Triple Bar for 3 years, the longest he'd stayed anywhere since the raid. He had money saved, nearly $2,000 tucked away in the bank. He'd been planning to buy his own spread eventually, maybe up in Wyoming or Colorado. But maybe, just maybe, he could do something different with that money. That night, Jake left the girls in Molly's care. The restaurant owner had a room above the establishment and insisted they stay there, and rode out to the Triple Bar. He found Dutch and Clara in the main house, going over accounts by lamplight. When Jake explained the situation, Clara's eyes immediately grew misty. 2 little girls. Oh, Jake, of course we'll help. They can stay in the hired hand's cottage. It's empty since the Hendersons moved on. And Lord knows I could use help with the cooking. These cowboys eat like locusts. She paused, studying Jake's face. But there's something else on your mind. What is it? Jake took a deep breath. I want to adopt them. Both of them. The words hung in the air. Dutch and Clara exchanged glances. Jake, Dutch said carefully, that's a big responsibility. You're a single man, a cowboy. Courts don't usually. I know, Jake interrupted. But I can't just walk away. And I've got money saved. Enough to buy a small place. Hire some help. I could make it work. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated at his inability to explain the urgency he felt. He lost everything once. My parents, my sister, my home. You know what it's like to be alone in this world. I can't let that happen to Sarah and Emma if there's anything I can do to stop it. Clara reached across and squeezed his hand. Then we'll help you make it work. Over the next 3 months, Jake's life transformed in ways he never could have imagined. He bought a small homestead 5 miles from the Triple Bar, 80 acres with a sturdy cabin, a barn, and good grazing land. He worked from dawn to dusk fixing up the place, with Sarah often beside him, handing him tools and learning everything he could teach her. Emma toddled around the yard, her cheeks filling out, her laughter becoming more frequent. The legal proceedings were complicated. Judge Hargrove in Helena was skeptical at first. A single cowboy wanting to adopt 2 orphan girls raised eyebrows. But Clara and Dutch vouched for Jake's character, and Molly Patterson testified to how devoted he'd been to the children's welfare. When Sarah stood before the judge and said firmly, "Jake saved us. He's been more of a father in 3 months than most girls ever get," the judge's stern expression softened. On a crisp October morning, the papers were signed. Sarah and Emma Morrison became official. Jake stood outside the courthouse with his daughters. He could hardly believe it, and felt a fullness in his heart he'd thought was gone forever. Life wasn't easy. There were nights when Emma cried from nightmares, mornings when money was tight, moments when Jake doubted whether he was doing anything right. But there were also evenings gathered around the fireplace, Sarah reading aloud from books Jake bought in town while Emma played with a rag doll Clara had made. There were Sunday dinners at the Triple Bar, surrounded by the community that had embraced their unusual family. There were small triumphs, Sarah's first successful batch of bread, Emma's first complete sentence, the moment Jake realized they'd all stopped flinching at sudden noises. Years later, Jake would stand at Sarah's wedding, watching her marry a good young rancher from the next county over. He'd hold Emma at her school graduation, bursting with pride at her teachers' glowing reports. He'd become a grandfather, then a great-grandfather, his small homestead growing into a prosperous ranch that stayed in the family for generations. But he never forgot that afternoon in Redemption Creek, when he'd almost walked past 2 small figures on a bench. He never forgot the way Sarah had held her sister with fierce determination, or how close they'd all come to losing each other forever. That moment had changed everything, had cracked open his carefully guarded heart and shown him that family wasn't just what you were born into. It was what you chose, what you fought for, what you built with love and stubbornness and faith. Sometimes the greatest journeys begin not with a grand adventure, but with a simple choice: to stop, to see, to care. Jake Morrison had been a drifting cowboy with nothing to lose. An orphan girl holding her sister had transformed him into a father, a protector, a man with everything to live for. And in saving them, he discovered they had saved him right back.